Leo DeRocher said Pete Reiser was the only player he ever saw that was better than Willie Mays. His first full season in the major leagues in 1941, he finished second in MVP voting. But statistically, he probably should have run away with the award. He led the league in batting average, slugging percentage, and OPS, and today we can calculate that his WAR was the best in the National League. All this at just age 22. But despite his prodigious offensive output, Pete really shined in the field. He had raw speed and he played defense with abandon. His aggressiveness and indomitable play would ultimately be his downfall. Pistol Pete played with such recklessness at times that he's most well known for his many collisions with concrete outfield walls. The guy had countless concussions, 7 known skull fractures, 7. And he was literally carted off the field 11 or 12 times, depending on the source of information. Pete would ultimately be the man responsible for the creation of the warning track and padded walls in the outfield. I'm joined today by Evan, a big Pete Reiser fan and friend of mine that I met on Reddit. So Evan, thanks for joining me. You're all the way from Portland, Oregon. I need to understand, because I know that you are primarily a Bob Gibson collector. But you had shared some posts in our subreddit about Pete Reiser, and I jumped on it because Sean Kelly, who we both know through the sub, had been talking to me before, maybe a year ago, about, man, you need to do a video on Pete Reiser. And so he's been on my list. I've got a list of like 40 guys, but I finally found a Pete Reiser collector. And so tell me about how that started and why Pete, if you don't mind.
Sure. So a few years ago, a buddy of mine gave me a book. It's a pretty just fun, simple book. It's called the greatest baseball stories ever told, and it's just a bunch of little vignettes and stories of subjects are all over the place. And one of the chapters was about Pete, and I didn't honestly know that much about him. I've read a lot of books about baseball history in the 40s and 50s and 60s, and I'd seen his name come up here and there, but those books tend to focus on the big stars, the Hall of Famers and whatnot. And I just found his story, frankly, insane. All of his immense injuries, but how he was, so highly regarded by other players and his managers, and was, if not for his injuries, would have likely been on track for a Hall of Fame career. So yeah, my buddy gave me that book. It sat on a shelf for a couple of years. I finally picked it up and started leafing through it, and then it was probably, I don't know, a year or two later, I got back into collecting cards again, and exclusively vintage. And Pete's cards are amazingly affordable, actually. His rookie is usually considered the 48, but I have his 41 play ball because I think that's his real rookie. And I just got enamored with his story and kept reading more and more about it. Because he was, he was known by, Leo DeRocher, his manager with the Dodgers, as the greatest player he'd ever seen. DeRocher managed Willie Mays as well, and he thought that Pete was as good or better than Willie Mays, and certainly was faster. But his story is also tragic and heartbreaking.
I try not to get too deep into stats here because honestly I'm more interested in the human element, but let's pause a minute and consider Pete's first couple of years. Sometimes people can get caught up in hyperbole, and Leo the Lip comparing Pete to Willie Mays, well, it just seems like maybe a little much, not fair to Pete. But maybe Leo saw the potential in the tools that Pete had. My intern Charles pointed out to me that in 1941, his first full season, Pete hit .343, slugged .558 with an OPS of .964. And if you're a WAR guy, he accumulated 8.0 BWAR. That's really impressive. I told intern Charles that Pete's production looked like it dropped off measurably in 42, falling to a 310, 375, 463 slash line, and an OPS of 838 for 5.5 WAR. But Chuck clued me in. What the stat sheet doesn't show is that through the first half of the season, Pete was running away with the batting title. In early June, he was hitting 366 with an OPS of 1022. As the kids say, he was raking. Then on July 18, Pete was chasing down a ball in center field and ran into the concrete wall head first at full speed. And remember, no padding on those walls yet, and no warning track in the outfield. Pete was laying motionless on the grass with blood coming out of his ears when Leo got to him. The Rocher actually started to cry as Pete was carried off the field on a stretcher. When he woke up the next morning in the hospital, Pete had a separated shoulder, a fractured skull, and a traumatic brain injury. The Cardinals team doctor examined him and recommended that he not return to the field that season. Whoever that doctor was, he was a man ahead of his time. Head injuries, obviously, are no joke. But this was 1942, and nobody took the brain injury as seriously as they should have. And shameless plug, if you haven't seen my episode on Adam Greenberg, please check it out. Adam was hit in the head in his first major league plate appearance. It took him years to get right. Adam talked to me about battling a lot of the same issues that Pete was dealing with. Pete didn't follow any concussion protocols or wait for his fractured skull to heal, of course. He was back in uniform as soon as he could walk. He was dizzy, his vision was blurry, he had headaches and nausea. None of that mattered. He played through it. But he would never be the same player again. Didn't even think about that. Like, if you've ever played baseball and you've played the outfield, to not have a warning track or a padded wall, it's just crazy.
It seems unthinkable now, doesn't it?
Especially with, I grew up in Detroit, and the old Tiger Stadium, the flagpole was in center field. It was in play. It was in center field. A lot like, not as crazy as what the Yankees had with the monuments out in center field, but just craziness out there.
That was an interesting part to me of reading more about Pete's story is learning all about the insane obstacles that were in outfields. Not just that there was no warning track and no padding, but there were just steel cage doors and monuments and flagpoles and anything you can imagine that these guys were supposed to navigate around while playing high level full speed baseball. But to your point, it was Branch Rickey when he was with the Dodgers, who actually originally drafted Pete when he was with the Cardinals. He added walls or padded pads to the walls after Pete's 15th crash or something into the walls and nearly died a couple of times. He finally added them, and I want to say it was 47, something like that, 47 or 48. It was a bit late for Pete. By then, though, he had smashed his head into those walls so many times that he played dizzy and with poor vision and with headaches regularly in the latter years of his career. But it was it was Pete Reiser who originated that because he got hurt so many times, and those were just some of his numerous insane injuries that he had.
And now a word from our sponsor. Pistol Pete Reiser, champion of stolen bases with 34 in 1946. He committed 6 more felonies than any other cushion copper in big league baseball. Among Reiser's loot were 7 thefts of home plate. With these master burglaries, Pete carried off a modern major league record. Pete says, "Don't catch me missing an important meal like breakfast when a dish of milk, fruit, and Wheaties is on the menu. Those whole wheat flakes come through in the nourishment department, and they've got a flavor that makes them mighty easy to take. Make it Wheaties, breakfast of champions, every morning." Wheaties and Breakfast of Champions are registered trademarks of General Mills Incorporated, Minneapolis, Minnesota. Back to the program. 5 games into the 41 season, I'm looking at my notes, he was beamed in the head by the Phillies, carried off the field on a stretcher for the first time. Yeah. And then 5 days later, Leo used him as a pinch hitter Uh,
Yeah.
his first at bat back, he hit a pinch hit grand slam uh, while he was still dizzy and
Yeah.
nauseous.
He
So the
uh, he
guy,
he famously hated the hospital, even though he was in it a lot, and snuck out many times. And it's sort of the bittersweet part, I think, about his story in general is that he the vast majority of the injuries that he sustained, first of all, were because he just played so damn hard. It wasn't that he was out of shape or some quirky thing happened and fluke injuries. He was hurt all the time because he was just killing himself out there. And a lot of that goes back to his childhood in St. Louis. He had a brother who was 5 years older than him, who was coincidentally drafted by the Yankees, and then passed away from scarlet fever not long after. Um, but he was always playing with bigger kids, the older kids, and he wasn't this particularly large guy himself. He was, I think, 5'11", buck 80, something like that. Um, but he really did it to himself because he just didn't know any other way to play. It was full on all the time. But as it relates to especially Leo DeRocher, I think that's where the bitter part of the sweetness comes in. Is that both when he played for the Dodgers and when he played in the Army, um, he was kind of taken advantage of a lot of the time because he was so good and so relied upon that often after these horrific injuries, whether it was a broken ankle or what would now be considered a concussion, um, Leo would have him as a bench player. Sort of there as a decoy, but in close games, then would just put him in anyways. And Pete was all too happy to oblige because he wanted to play the game. And so there are countless stories of times when he was incredibly injured, and in any person in a modern era now would be on the disabled list and certainly would not be allowed to play. They just they put him on the bench and we're just going to have you here as a sort of a threat to the other team, but you're not going to play. And by the end of the game, it was a close game, and there he was in the game because they valued his skill so much.
you were talking, and I remember taking a note. In 1941, he had a collision with a wall, fractured his skull, and then left the hospital. Took a train to Pittsburgh, and was in the
Yeah,
stands watching the game. And Leo saw him and said, "Hey, put your uniform on." And then he used
yeah,
him as a pinch hitter in the game.
yeah.
Yeah, the,
He couldn't.
he
He
so
couldn't. He couldn't stay away. He just couldn't stay away. He was
Yeah,
absolutely
Leo
addicted
wasn't
to it.
doing him any help, was he? But he did
He
get
would.
he got a single in that pinch hit, and then rounded first and collapsed, and they had to take him off the field.
Yeah.
So just insane.
He was.
But
He was, I believe, carried off the field 12 times on a stretcher in his career, which is
so crazy.
that's insane.
Not only that, dude, but I saw that he was read his last rites at one point in the
Yeah.
clubhouse by a priest. So the
Yeah.
guy was like, I want to go back a minute because Evan had mentioned briefly Pete playing baseball during the war. Pete was in the Army and lost the 43, 44, and 45 seasons to World War II. Not only that, but while playing baseball in the Army, he suffered an injury, again, due to his reckless style of play. Here's Evan talking more about it.
Well, he got drafted like a lot of people his age during World War II, but he was pretty quickly diagnosed by Army doctors as being unfit for combat service because he had already sustained numerous injuries at that point. Um, but his commanding officer knew who he was and knew what a good ball player he was, and so he was actually supposed to get his discharge papers. But I forget the guy's name, his CO, but he basically said, "Wait a minute, we've got a pretty good ball club here with the Army, and we'd like you to play for us." So instead of discharging him, as they should have, they kept him around to play for the Army baseball team. And as you referenced, he had a terrible tumble. Basically, they had bushes as an outfield wall, and he did the same thing as always, and went flying back to catch a ball, and ended up rolling down some 20-some foot embankment and tore a bunch of ligaments in his shoulder. And I'm forgetting right now if that was the time or if it was just before that, that he basically taught himself to be ambidextrous. He's naturally right-handed, but he had so many injuries to his right shoulder that he couldn't really throw with it anymore. So he practiced to the point of proficiency in playing the outfield, throwing left-handed. And completely switched his throwing arm in his career, and a lot of it happened while he was in the Army. Finally, after I think it was about 2 years he was in the Army, some other commander came in and took a look at his record and was flabbergasted that he was still there, and immediately discharged him. I believe like within the hour of seeing his records and looking at his medical reports, and couldn't figure out why the guy had been there. But of course, it was just another story of he was a great player, and he wanted to be there, and he wanted to play, and so somebody took advantage of that and kept him where he should not have been.
Yeah, and as I said earlier, he was aged 24, 25, 26, if I did my math right, before he got out of the Army. So that was kind of like, prime baseball. So not only did he lose out on baseball opportunities, but he got hurt in the process, to your point, and then he lost out on all that potential income. He also got pneumonia while he was in the Army, so it was it was quite an experience.
It was never ending. I mean, right up to the end of his life, it was never ending. Managing a D-League baseball team, and he died when he was, I want to say 62, I believe, of respiratory conditions. I mean, he had it rough his entire life. Yeah.
Just to add some detail here, Pete did die at age 62 from emphysema in 1981. In the end, all those brain injuries, skull fractures, broken ankle, dislocated shoulder, burned hand, it was the cigarettes that ultimately got him. Pete was a lifelong smoker. And you have to kind of cut these guys some slack. During the 1940s especially, the cigarette companies were giving away cigarettes as part of the rations for GIs. And a lot of guys who weren't even smokers going into World War II came out of World War II addicted to cigarettes. And it really wasn't really all that well known how dangerous they were. In fact, it was still in the late 50s or early 60s when they were advertising cigarettes on cartoons like this one from the Flintstones.
They sure work hard, don't they, Barney?
Yeah? I hate to see them work so hard.
Yeah, me too. Let's go around back where we can't see them.
Gee, we ought to do something, Fred.
Okay. How's about taking a nap?
Hey, I got a better idea. Let's take a Winston break.
That's it! Winston is the one filter cigarette that delivers flavor 20 times a pack. Winston's got that filter blend.
Yeah, Fred. Filter blend makes the big taste difference, and only Winston has it up front where it counts. Here, ahead of the pure white filter. Winston packs rich tobaccos specially selected and specially processed for good flavor in filter smoking.
Yeah, Barney, Winston tastes good, like a cigarette should.
The Flintstones has been brought to you by Winston, America's best-selling, best-tasting filter cigarette.
Winston tastes good like a cigarette should.
Yeah. I don't know if you saw this quote or if you knew this quote, but in spring training of 1946, a reporter asked him, "Where do you think you're going to finish this year?" and he
I know the quote. Yeah.
he says probably the hospital. So
Yeah, he was there a lot. He was there a lot, and like I said before, sometimes he was discharged, and sometimes he snuck out. He was famous for sneaking out of the hospital when the doctors wanted him to stay and told him he shouldn't play, and he just left and went to the ballpark and got back on the bench.
If you have a keen eye, you may have noticed when I showed his baseball reference page that his given name is not Pete, but Harold Patrick Reiser. He loved westerns as a kid, and he would walk around with 2 toy pistols. His parents started calling him Pistol Pete, after the legendary cowboy Two Gun Pete. Two Gun Pete was real-life cowboy and U.S. Marshal Frank Eaton, who, by the way, is also the inspiration for the Oklahoma State mascot, Pistol Pete.
In '68, my father was called to the door and shot down like a darn mad dog. There were 6 men killed him.
Were you there?
I was present, yes.
How old were you, Frank, that
I was just a little kid of a boy. But after the death of my father, there was a man there by the name of Moses Beeman, a friend of father. He came over there and he put his hand on top of my head and he says, "May an old man's curse rest on you the longest day you live. If you don't find and shoot the men that murdered your father." Well, I was just a kid of a boy, and I thought I had it to do. And he came over with a pair of old Dragoon cap and ball pistols and learnt me how to use them. That's how I got my name of Pistol Pete. I learned how to use them guns. I can use them yet better than any man in the state, I think.
You put on the head, and everybody lights up.
The face behind America's brightest orange.
He's very much more than just a mascot. He's kind of a symbol and an icon for the university.
It's just a very unusual, bordering on the bizarre connection that our fans have with this mascot.
He's one of only, I believe, 4 players who led the league. I want to say it was in '41. In his first full season, he led the league in batting average. I think it was runs scored, triples, and doubles, which has only ever been accomplished by Ty Cobb, Rogers Hornsby, and Stan the Man did it twice.
Oh, wow.
And Pete. that's the list.
So Evan and I have talked about Pete's style of play, his injuries, his time in the war. But for all that, what I think should define the man is what he did, or rather what he didn't do, in 1947. I want to mention specifically what happened in 1947 because I think it really speaks to the guy's character. Anybody who's seen the movie 42 or knows Jackie Robinson's story knows that the Dodgers, some of the Dodgers players, were signing a petition and were pushing other players to sign that basically they wouldn't play with a black man.
Sure.
And Pete was one of the few who refused to sign it. So kudos to Pete and
Pete and Pee Wee as well. Pete and Pee Wee were good buddies.
They were roommates.
That's one of my.
I think he stood up and I think he was Pee Wee's best man in his wedding, is what I read. So
I believe that's right.
Yeah,
and I think I showed you a photograph that I bought recently, which is Pee Wee and Pete at Leo DeRocher's daughter's wedding, and all of them in a photo together. It's pretty amazing.
Do you mind if I share that in the video?
No, not at all. Please.
Okay.
It's a great little quirky piece that I picked up recently. I mean, one of my, not to get too far off topic, but one of my, I think, favorite images in all of baseball history is Pee Wee and Jackie standing at the steps to the dugout when Jackie was being booed and called horrific names by the crowd, and Pee Wee went and stood over next to him and put his arm around him in front of everybody. And there's just such a great shot of that. Yeah, seminal moment.
Yeah, for sure. There's a few of those guys that stand out. Steve Gromek with Larry Doby celebrating in 1948 as well. But
Tobaccoland, USA is that picturesque and historic region of the U.S. Southland where grow the milder, better-tasting cigarette tobaccos which have made the name Chesterfield synonymous with American smoking pleasure. With so many of the young people gone to war, those left at home must work hard and long. And the Leggett & Myers Tobacco Company is proud of the fact that Chesterfields are being smoked not only by the millions of men and women working on the home front, but by millions of fighting men on every outpost and battlefront throughout the world. Whenever there are fighting men, wherever battles are raging, along with the essential weapons and ammunition which give them their fighting strength, go the few comforts which make a fighting man's life more bearable. Among these, none is more welcome than the cigarette. Every day, thousands of cases of Chesterfields leave the factory bound overseas. The makers of Chesterfield are proud of their cigarette's national reputation, proud of its universal and ever-growing popularity. And they are proudest of all that to millions of men and women in war work and in the services, both at home and abroad, Chesterfield gives what they want in a smoke, a milder, cooler, better taste that really satisfies. You can't buy a better cigarette.
do you have, other than the photograph, do you have any particular memorabilia or cards that are special to you that you can share?
Yeah. Well, sitting behind me, you might be able to see it sitting on top of my stereo. I've got his exhibits card from the early 40s, which is a nice pose of him. His 41 play ball, which is a great.
How do I flip between? Let's see, is this you? There we go.
41 play ball, which is, it's his first card, and then he didn't have another one until 48, which is, every like I said, everyone considers to be his rookie, but certainly is not. And then I don't have it out right now, but last spring sometime I picked up some team picture pack photos from the early 40s. I think they're from 41 or 42, I forget. One each of Pete and Pee Wee, and they're just these beautiful black and white team issue photos of those guys. That I keep tucked away safely. I don't have that out on display because I need to put it in a frame, and I don't want it to get damaged. So, yeah, I have a few of his other cards from the late 40s, early 50s. I think I shared with you recently. I finally picked up his 52 when he was with Cleveland, with the yellow back and the big smile on his face. And it's his last year and his last card. So, yeah, there isn't a ton, honestly. I mean, between World War II and his relatively short career, he had one card in 41, and then cards from 48 to 52, and that's it. I think he's on a manager. He's on a manager card in the I think the early 60s, and that's it.
He played in that era where there just weren't cards made during that World War II era, to your point. So yeah, which is kind of hard to imagine today, because even a utility middle infielder has 20 different variations and tops 2026. So.
Yeah.
How often does your job call you out of bed in the middle of the night? Well, if you were a doctor, it would be often. And generally, there isn't much time to spare.
Coffee, doctor?
Oh, fine.
Have a Camel with your coffee.
Thanks.
You know, this night work's kind of rough, isn't it?
That's right. But a Camel's always a pleasure.
Yes, folks, the pleasing mildness of a Camel is just as enjoyable to a doctor as it is to you or me. In a nationwide survey, doctors in all branches of medicine were asked, "What cigarette do you smoke, doctor?" The brand named most was Camel's. Tens of thousands of doctors, general practitioners, surgeons, specialists, doctors in every branch of medicine were included. And according to this nationwide survey, more doctors smoke Camels than any other cigarette. Try Camels yourself, the cigarette so many doctors enjoy.
He did manage, I believe, along with Leo for the Giants. I want to say it was in the late 50s, early 60s. I'm forgetting. I honestly don't know a ton about that period with him. But then he ended up managing a bunch of like D-League clubs in the upper Midwest, particularly in Indiana. I think a team called Kokomo, which was it's one of the parts of the story in that book that I referenced earlier, is that he was sort of pitied by his former teammates and just former colleagues in Major League Baseball in general, because he had been this great promise and great prolific player, obviously derailed by all these injuries, and then he kind of faded into obscurity in the bush leagues, if you will, as a manager. And then, like I said, he died in '81 when he was 62 years old. So he didn't get a lot of chance to do much after that. But yeah, his story after that is filled with holes and obscurity, and but he never really stopped being around the game. He was always involved in some way after that, but obviously not playing after 52. He just kind of he bounced around to a bunch of odd and quirky positions within low levels of baseball. Yeah.
After all those concussions and skull fractures and all that, I wonder how he was at the end of his life. Hopefully he was mentally intact. All that physical abuse, and what ended up getting him was the cigarettes in the end.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
Unfortunately.
He
so
definitely
many guys during that time.
In some interviews that I've seen, he definitely talked about still. Certainly at the end of his playing career, he said he was seeing double regularly, was dizzy all the time, had headaches all the time. And he did talk about that as ongoing issues. Probably not quite as much as when he was actually still playing, but definitely spoke about that in interviews, that he was just kind of always experienced some of that. And when you read some of his quotes and kind of the language that he uses and his cadence and so forth, you can sort of read between the lines with it that he was a little. I don't want to say he wasn't all there, but I've never seen like a video interview of him. So this is all
I haven't either. Yeah.
Writing, but you definitely can read between the lines a little bit. There's something just missing there slightly. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So I mean, how could he not have long effects from that? Now we would call it CTE, and he'd be on a billboard. But back then it was just he bumped his head. Get back in there, kid.
I appreciate your time.
Oh,
thanks for visiting.
It's my pleasure. I've always loved baseball. Grew up watching and playing, and love being part of the community, as I've told you before, on the vintage card sub, and all the people who are so into it, passionate about it. The amazing things that I've learned, in addition to the fun of collecting, obviously, is a thrill, but the things that I've learned from all the people in the community about especially quirky historical facts and stories. And Pete is one of my favorites, far and away. I mean, it's fun to read about the great feats of Mickey Mantle and Willie Mays and all the great players over the years. But I find these stories about people like Pistol Pete a little bit more interesting.
Yeah.
There's a raw honesty about it that doesn't exist quite as much as the Golden Boys, if you will.
Oh, I know, yeah, that's interesting. Okay, Allie. What's Allie's red? Oh, Jackie, run! Oh. Oh, being submissive.
I've never heard Coda bark. I don't think.
Really? Oh, God.
I don't know. Maybe. I guess I haven't really paid attention. Who's chasing who?
You know, it changes. Allie! Allie! Don't care